Here we
Good
go, here we
evening,
go, here we go.
everyone. Yes, you. Now I have to do it again. Wait.
Sorry.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Voidcast, where normally we sit around and play tabletop RPGs. But unfortunately, our Grandmaster Roger couldn't make it tonight. He was feeling a bit under the weather, so go to our Discord, send him all the love and hugs you can send him for a quick recovery. And well,
kisses too.
yes, and then we thought, what now? We are totally lost, obviously, because we were supposed to play D&D, and now nothing. Right?
Oh, so let's just talk about stuff
Let's not talk about anything then. Let's just sit here.
Okay.
in awkward silence. Yeah.
I wasn't supposed to do anything tonight, so
Let's enjoy the sound of silence.
And if anyone wants to cheer up Roger, he will really appreciate artwork from rapiers. It's his favorite weapon in D&D. So
Yeah, true.
if you can send him rapier artwork, that would be great. That would really cheer him up.
Also
Alright.
true. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we are here tonight to talk about tabletop RPGs, because we love talking about tabletop RPGs. And as you can see, and with Eric as well, and I know that Jasper and Ash have somewhere some shelves full of books or hard drives filled with PDFs. There's a lot of different systems.
No.
Tabletop RPG systems, and well, most well known is Dungeons and Dragons, but there's so much more. And I thought, why not discuss some of these systems and games and see what we like and don't like, and why we think that that, for example, the D&D system is doing so well and is so famous, and others might stay a bit more in the background. Of course, there's currently two very popular systems, one of which is the Apocalypse system that gets used a lot in Kickstarters. So why is that, and that sort of stuff. But before we go into that discussion, I think Ashley really wants to talk about something. And I want him to talk about something, because...
well, I never plug anything on this show, and that's because I never really had anything to plug before. But a couple of us from the community have got together, and as you can see from what's written up here, we're starting up a stream challenge. So it's a stream challenge for DMs, and it's going to be a one-shot of D&D 5th edition with some pre-generated 5th level characters. So they're going to be 12 episodes, so 12 DMs battling it out to do a one-shot in the best way, get scored out of 40, and then the top 4 will go into a grand final where they flip around and become the players, and then the stream decides. The grand prize for this, as I was just telling the guys earlier, is you'll be gifted 1 square foot of land in Scotland and a tree planted in your honour. And if you know anything, or you've read the memes on the internet, I assure you they're true, my wife is Scottish, you will then become a Lord or Lady of Scotland. So the grand prize is we are gifting you a patent of nobility forever and ever.
Oh, that's so cool.
That's
That's
a perfect
Am I
prize.
DMing, by the way? Am I DMing? Because now I want to know.
If you volunteer, you can certainly go on and DM. Yeah, so that would be the grand prize, and should be a lot of fun. All proceeds of it, because we're not really doing this for anything other than just our own enjoyment. So all proceeds will be going to charity for it as well. So
That's so awesome. So
it should be a good laugh.
you guys made a Twitch channel for this?
Yeah, we've made a Twitch channel. We've started a Twitter stream, which is brand new for me. I don't tweet, so that'll be interesting for me to start.
Oh wow!
It's all going to be on the Fireside Portal, so at Fireside Portal. Find us on Twitter, find us on Twitch, and stand by. We should be looking to go live sometime in January.
You just got your first. You just got your first follower, my friend.
Oh wow!
And I would tell everyone. to go on Twitch right now, you are on Twitch because you're watching this. Or you're watching this later on YouTube, maybe. But then go to Twitch and go the Fireside portal. And follow it.
And I'm following it.
The Fireside. Okay, and now back to our channel. Oh, commercials.
Are you back?
I think we're back. Are we back?
I'm back.
Okay.
We are back. I think I'm back.
All right.
I'm here.
So, tabletop RPGs, resolution mechanics, and systems. There's a lot. I don't even know where to start, but to say that this is... I have a sort of personal agenda with this. I have been thinking about some stories that I really want to tell, and I was thinking about what system would fit those stories best. In thinking about that, I did a lot of research and went through all my tabletop RPG books and had a lot of questions. And then I went on YouTube and tried to find for videos about people discussing tabletop mechanics or systems, and there's not a lot. So I thought, if it's not there, then why don't we do it? This is totally unplanned. We don't know where it's going, but I know that all four of us have played a decent amount of tabletop RPGs. Yeah, let's dive right into it. First of all, I think I would start with a question, or maybe should we talk about what actually is a tabletop RPG system or a resolution mechanic? Is there a difference?
As soon as I've googled resolution mechanic, I'm sure you know.
That's a good question.
Do you know what I mean with a resolution mechanic?
Something that forwards the game in some way.
Yeah. So
by getting a certain goal, by hitting a certain goal.
So I feel like Dungeons and Dragons has a lot of rules, like what do you do in combat? How do you determine the order of combat or whatever? There's all these side rules, but the main resolution is you either fail or succeed on a certain skill check. And the way you do that is by rolling a d20 and adding your modifier. And if it's higher than a target number, then you have succeeded and you do the task that you set out to do. So the resolution mechanic is rolling the d20 and the outcomes that you can generate with this resolution mechanic is fail or succeed.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's the resolution mechanic, and then you also said the system.
So yeah, I usually use those terms sort of interchangeably, but I don't think that's really fair. Because if you take a look at the Apocalypse system, for example, which is used a lot right now, it's rolling 2d6. We recently played a Hogwarts one-shot using this system. There's a lot more to it than just rolling the 2d6 and determining the outcome, succeed or fail. And all those other rules, I think, will actually make sort of the game system. And then rolling the 2d6 is just the resolution mechanic.
I think it's fair, rather than calling it the sort of system or the resolution mechanic. I think it's fair to categorize them into a couple of different sort of bands. The way I've always seen it is you've got the skill-based games. So that's your D&Ds, your Call of Cthulhu's, where you actually have some sort of skill, and you have training in that skill. And then the better you are at it, the easier it becomes to succeed. What you then have is kind of like the RP-based games. So your Harry Potters, your Apocalypse systems, where actually what you're really doing is you're just randomizing, aren't you? If you think about the way the Harry Potter worked, it was just, I'm going to cast a spell. Well, I know how to cast a spell. I'm either going to succeed or I'm going to fail. that's how I sort of see the systems and the dice rolls. It's more of a it's a system choice based upon whether you want learned skills or whether you want randomized events.
All right,
And then the difference between the Dungeons and Dragons and the Call of Cthulhu, for example, is that it's you base your success on your own skills in Call of Cthulhu, while you base your success on your success in Dungeons and Dragons by comparing it to a result that's been given by the other, by your opponent in a way.
That's a really good point, and actually one of the things that I thought was good for a discussion, like one of the smaller points, which is, what do you think is better, or is there do you want to know if you succeed or fail immediately when you're rolling a die, or do you want your players to know if they succeed by themselves, or do you as a game master, or do you want game masters to set a number that is unknown to the players, which they then have to beat or not?
Completely. Oh, sorry. No, go ahead.
Yes.
No, you. Well, first off, like every episode of Talking Void, when we end the episode, we know that every answer is a good answer.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Just wanted to say that.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. There's no correct answers. We are just doing a philosophical, theoretical discourse.
There are definitely things that I prefer above others. That's true. Yeah.
There are no wrong answers. Some are just a bit more right than others, and that's it. So.
Yeah.
I think for me it's actually dependent on whether I'm playing or whether I'm DMing. Because if I'm playing, weirdly, I actually prefer the Dungeons and Dragons style. I have a skill. I'd like to know right now if I've passed or failed that skill, because that will then inform my decisions. As a dungeon master, and I'm sure that those of you that have played Dust City Outlaws with me will know, I quite like when things are hidden, when you're not sure what's actually happened, and it might be that you've rolled a dice an hour and a half ago, and now I'm going to tell you what it means.
Yes, but those are consequences of. So then we are looking at systems that don't actually have only a succeed and a fail state to their resolution, but have some sort of either critical or failure of maybe a positive or a negative consequence. I wanted to get into that later, but I thought it was interesting that you actually mentioned Dungeons and Dragons as a system where you know when you succeeded, and Dust City Outlaws as when you don't. And I actually don't agree with you, because I would say the exact opposite. Because when I'm rolling a die in Dungeons and Dragons, half of the time I don't know whether I passed or failed, because I don't know what the difficulty score is that the game master has set. And for Dust City Outlaws, it says on my character sheet that I have a 80% in investigation. So when I roll my d10 and I roll under that 80%, then I know that I succeeded my investigation and can actually use that to narrate my own actions. I know that I succeeded, and I can immediately say, okay, so I'm searching this room. Look, what I found or actually investigated, that's up to the game master, of course. But do you see what I mean? Or
yeah, I think it's maybe because I haven't actually played an awful lot of Dungeons and Dragons, because I started DMing when I was very, very young.
Well, yeah, then you always know the DC.
That's it. So I've always known what the answer is.
Well, it also, and I heard this one on the internet a while ago, that if you roll higher than 15, most of the times in D&D you succeed, and if you're if you roll below 5 or 7, most of the times you fail. So 9 out of 10 times when you roll higher than 50 or lower than 7, you automatically know the outcome. It's everything in between that makes it exciting, but all the other rolls.
That's actually when you're working with averages, but the thing that might surprise you is when it differs. Because, for example, if that would be true, then rogues that have expertise in a certain role and you don't know that you have a rogue across to you, might actually break that rule and surprise you even more. And I think that, and the fact that you never know the level of the character that's in front of you might play into that as well. Because if you get surprised by a bluff check or the deception check from a 20th level character and you think he's even to you, then you might be confused with the outcome as well.
Yeah,
and that's where Shanks just put in. Sorry, Shanks just put in chat that he uses hidden rolls, and that's exactly why. It's to stop people sort of knowing what's going to happen there, which I kind of get. I just find again with D&D, I spend a lot of time introducing new players to D&D, so I end up doing everything kind of in the open, on the level. So it's kind of maybe it's my view of it that's warped.
I always try to hide my dice rolls. I try never to lie about them. I did that in the past because I rolled exceptionally high and I almost killed all my players every session. So I had to back down a bit. But and nowadays I don't lie about my dice rolls as much. But I do keep them hidden just to keep the excitement going. So if I roll high for a skill challenge or anything like that, I want to see the fear on their faces. That's why I DM them.
Yeah, I think for me as a player and also as a dungeon master, there's something to say for both methods. So either players know when they succeed or they don't. When they don't know if they succeeded, you can really play with the sort of expectations of the players and build suspense and that sort of stuff, which is kind of cool. You can get these weird surprises or awesome surprise. You can surprise the players with, I don't know, you actually succeeded, or you rolled really high but you actually failed, and you can narrate that. But I think as a player, and sometimes as a GM as well, I like it when my players have more narrative control, and I think that a system where a player immediately knows whether they succeeded or not gives them the opportunity to actually narrate their own actions more, because they can already say like, okay, I'm attacking with my sword and I hit him in the shoulder, my enemy in the shoulder or whatever, because they know that they hit, they know that they do damage.
Well, maybe then that's the point of why, one of the reasons why D&D is so well liked and why everyone keeps returning to it is the choice, is that the DM actually can sort of say to you as the party, right, you are going to need 15s to pass this. And that is one of the great ways of building tension, is to sort of say, you know, you're going to need a 15, what are you going to do about it? And so the discussions start then about, well, okay, we're going to have to assist this person, and then we're going to have to go back. And that's something that's possibly missing from some of the other games where, like Call of Cthulhu, when the dice rolls are all open.
That's actually a really good point. In the Dungeons and Dragons, I see it as a system where players don't know whether they succeed, but it's actually up to the GM, because they can always tell you the AC of this creature is this, the DC before rolling the check. You want to jump across that ravine? Okay, it's a DC of 18. So that's actually a very good point. I also want to mention that DM Shanks in chat had an excellent point for the hidden rules, which we actually had in the one-shot we played with Top Down Tabletop, which is doing stealth checks. That's always a funny one. And that's actually a really great example of one where it's super cool if you don't know whether you succeeded or not, because you roll the die and then you don't know if you're hidden. So you start describing it as I'm hidden in shadows and crawling along the walls. I'm trying to get past these guards, and the DM already knows that the guards already saw you, and you're basically just there in bright light against the wall. which makes for some very funny.
On the other side of the spectrum, I really like the thing where, for example, you make an insight check towards an opponent, and you roll like an 18, and you get the story being told by your dungeon master. Well, he's just a nice guy, he's all honest and stuff. And you think, well, I succeeded because I rolled an 18, but then you actually failed. And that's what makes the tension so much more important later on in the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's something to say for both, as we already said, right?
Oh, really?
Surprise! But you actually convinced me, because one of the things that I thought for the story that I wanted to tell, I always really like it when players know the outcome. But I'm now convinced that no, there's actually a lot of situations where it's more fun if the players don't know their outcome. So
I always try to hide the outcome from my players, so I never say, well, the DC is 15, good luck and have a roll. I always say, well, you want to go across the ravine by doing these stepping stones that are 50 feet above the ground. Oh, good luck, make a dice roll. And I never tell them the DC, because it makes them even more scared.
Yeah.
So I
then-
also like to tell the DC at that moment where it becomes really important, when it's the last hit of the combat and either the whole party dies or the boss dies. We had this on a single encounter, and that player keeps coming back to me to tell me how awesome he was in that encounter. And it is,
Was it
he
me?
needed the... No, it was not you. It was, well, we both know him. But... and he keeps forgetting Eric's name, so now Eric knows who I'm talking about. But he...
Hi, Alex.
oh, yeah, Alex. Anyway. And
Way to throw him under the bus.
He was like... No, but he loves it was the most cool thing he ever did. So he went up to the enemy and I said, okay, but this is the final chance. You have to roll an AC of 18. If you miss... then you're dead, and the whole party is dead because this death wave was going on, and everybody was down, and one was imprisoned in the astral plane, and everything was happening at the same time. And then he rolled like a 4, but he missed. But then he remembered that he could spend a rage point to take advantage on his attack, and he rolled that one, and he rolled an exact 18 or something. He hit, and the enemy went down. The spell dissipated, and everybody came back. So at that point, it's really cool to say that you have to hit the DC of 18 at that point, just to build the tension and have everybody invested in that role.
So before moving on to the next point that I will introduce, I wanted to mention that D&D W me and Val had an interesting discussion about the stealth mechanic, and that's. If you always tell your players you can assume that you're hidden, or you believe that you're hidden, Val said, then why don't you let them roll a D2? As in yes or no, because it doesn't really matter. And I think that's an interesting point, because I think there's definitely moments where, as a game master, you can tell your players that they succeeded on a stealth roll specifically. So it's cool if it's like if they rolled an 18 and that there's some uncertainty on whether they are hidden or not. But in other cases they rolled at 18 and you can just tell them, oh yeah, you're totally hidden. Like these guards are drunk, they're playing cards, they have no idea that you're here, just to make the player feel more accomplished, or actually like make them feel more powerful or skillful.
Yeah, but what I also sometimes do is when a player, for example, stealth, and that's a very important one. If a player fails his or her roll by 1 or 2, so he or she needed to roll a 15 and they rolled a 14 or a 13, I always say, I always try to do something like you snap a branch while trying to stealth your way, and the guards are looking your direction, and one of them is now asking to the darkness who goes there. So
there also you make them aware. You make them aware that they feel that they might have failed.
But after that, I also give them the opportunity to improvise other skills. So so what are you doing with this situation? Are you coming out of the shadows and present yourself, oh sorry, I lost my way, or do you attack them? Or then I still give them a chance to do something awesome, even with a failed roll. If they fail with 5 or 6 or 7, then they just fail, and they are in broad daylight trying to sneak past guards in the open street.
I really like that, actually.
I think with many of these problems, it's a session 0 problem. You know, I always try, especially in the session 0s, I don't really have many house rules or many quirks, other than I tend to say the same sort of introductions each time to certain things. As again, you've all seen from Dust City Outlaws, where I keep saying, well, you tell me, what do you want to do? It's definitely one of those problems where there's going to be some people that are going to love it and some people that are absolutely going to loathe it. So yeah, anything like that where it's I'm going to make you roll stealth in the dark, or I'm going to make you do this in a particular way that might be sort of a bit left field. It's a session 0 problem. And if everyone's cool with it from session 0, go for it.
Well, that's interesting that you're saying that, actually, because I see D&DW me. There we go, Michel.
Can we just say D&D with me?
With me. Oh, D&D with me. Oh, of course.
D&D with me.
D&D with me. Is that, what about group stealth? Because I think that we had the session where we were doing group stealth in the Endless Forest during okay, this is the Precipice of Dreams. I was having the Legacy of Time in my head, so I couldn't get it out. And we were doing stealth, and I really didn't know what system Roger was using for group stealth. And so I felt really vulnerable in that session, even though I had done the spell that gave you plus 10 on the stealth check, and we moved within 30 feet of each other. I still didn't know if a 1 would make the difference.
That was a very tense moment, by the way.
And we got discovered. So in a sense, yeah, and we got discovered anyway, even though we had all these spells on us and had a lot of good rolls. So I still have to talk to Roger about that.
Well,
actually.
It's not entirely true. I think we got discovered when we entered the hag's lair. But before that,
not that one. When we bypassed the watchers near the tree. When we moved through with the Spriggans through the forest, and the dog saw us. So at that one, because indeed, when we were just us and we were moving towards the hex lair, we did get past everything, but we were invisible as well.
Wasn't the case there that one of us that we weren't all actually in the range of your spell anymore, of Pass Without Trace? But I don't know.
I think we were, but the Spriggans were behind us. But it doesn't matter. But the thing is, I didn't know what rules were being used at that point. And so I got confused with the result. And that's what I think what Ash is saying is pretty cool, and what D&D with me was saying is pretty cool as well. What do you decide when you're doing group stealth? That's kind of a different thing.
Yeah. And let's not go into that, because that's I think I recently read either this weekend on Reddit, or I saw someone else discuss it. They actually had a fairly big discussion on how to handle group stealth, and I think everyone had valid points. And in the end, it's just like whatever the GM decides, and better yet, follow Ash's example, and that's maybe one of those things you decide or talk about in a session 0. I actually wanted to move on to the next topic, which we already briefly touched upon, and that's why I want to return to it. So we've mostly talked about either failing or succeeding a certain check, but there's multiple outcomes that are possible. Dungeons and Dragons has 4, for example. It has succeed or fail, or it has a critical succeed or a extreme fail condition. So these are conditions where something extra happens, right? And there's other systems where you also have the opposites of these things. So you might succeed in your task. So in this case, I see a critical hit or a critical success as you succeed in your task and something extra happens. And for a critical fail, it's you fail your task and something extra negative happens. But there's also systems that have ways to that do the opposite, where you can succeed on a task, but there's actually a negative consequence to this. Or there you can fail on a task, but there's a positive outcome.
Yeah, and I think for at least three of us in here, I'm not sure about Jasper, but I think the system that does this the best is Vampire the Masquerade. Like, without a shadow of a doubt. Like the hunger mechanic and the hunger dice, I think is just so perfect for this.
It was so beautiful. I love that game.
I love that system. I love that dice mechanic. But I love dice pools, for example, and that's a larger question that we have to answer. That we definitely have to talk about, because that's when we talk about resolution mechanics, I think that's ultimately the big question. What do you use? What do you like? So we'll get to that. But yes, so Vampire the Masquerade does this very, very well. There is another system that does this very well, and that's Fantasy Flight's Genesis system, which is used for Age of Empire, Age of Rebellion, the Star Wars games, and they have their...
that's with the many-colored dice and successes and failure. Yeah. Oh, I love that.
So I think this is... I think this might be my favorite resolution mechanic, but it also has some cons, definitely. But basically what you do is you add a green die to your die pool for the points you have in your skill, for example. I have 2, so I add 2 to my dice pool. Then I might be exceptionally trained for it, so I add a yellow one. And then I'm doing this under duress or high stress, so the DM tells me to add 2 of these black dice, which are like disadvantage die. You can also get advantage die, and there's like force die to do some different stuff. But there you roll the die, you just count successes and fails on the different dice, and they are super narrative. So your die roll tells you, okay, you have 3 successes, but your disadvantage die was also a success, so actually a failure. So then you know that you succeed your task, but there's also a negative consequence to this. And then you have your force die that can give you extra resources and stuff. But yeah, it's highly narrative, where your roll determines a lot more than just fail or succeed. Same with Vampire the Masquerade, where you can succeed on a task, but if your hunger dice are the ones that causing you to succeed, it's not actually your character that's succeeding, but it's the beast within you that's succeeding. So if you're trying to stop somebody from running, succeeding would mean that you actually grab them and you stop them. If you succeed with a messy critical, what they call, on your hunger die, you stop them by ripping them apart, for example.
Yeah. And what I love about these systems, because I've heard about them a lot more, because I think also Warhammer Roleplay works with that system nowadays. And what I love about that system is that it really focuses on the narrative and role-playing aspect of the game, rather than I hit you with a sword, I do this much damage, now it's your turn, you hit me with a sword, you did this much damage, etc., etc. It really encourages players and DMs more to think about, okay, this action just happened, so what happened? Describe your action, describe how it looks, describe how your character fell off a train but narrowly grabbed the ledge and is still holding on to the side of the train, etc., etc. It's much more Hollywood movie style and less I hit you with my sword and play.
It's very narrative. So the Vampire the Masquerade, and for their other games as well, the system is called the Storyteller system, which is a dice pool system, and then the Genesis system, Fantasy Flight also had some Warhammer games. I think that they might use that same system.
Yeah, way back in the day. But the Fantasy Flight are renowned in the tabletop world for their dice being a little bit strange. So if you think anybody who's watching who's played X-Wing, for example, or played
I'm still
Star Wars Legion, or Star Wars Legion, like it uses a very similar sort of system with sort of very specific dice. But one question I do have, which I've noticed over the years, is do you find that it is almost an inverse proportionality between the length of rules and the difficulty when it comes to the dice? So if you think of something like Harry Potter that we played quite recently, or Dust City Outlaws, very, very rules light, very roleplay heavy, and the dice rolling system is actually comparatively easy, either the Apocalypse or something very similar to it, or a percentile. Whereas then the more sort of rules heavy you get, the more complex the dice mechanic becomes, and it's almost gets to the stage of being a turn off. I remember when I first read the rules for Vampire, I was like, oh my god, I do not understand this at all, because it's so long and it's so in depth.
I actually think that I don't think they are mutually exclusive, sort of. I don't think they necessarily go together, like complex dice mechanics and complex rules. Not at all, even. I think the Genesis system, for example, and even the Storyteller system for Vampire the Masquerade is actually a super easy system. You roll the dice, and you count your successes. Your DM tells you how many successes you need. That's all there is to it. Then the way you assemble your dice pool is actually your attribute and your skill, for example, and there is some complexity there, but you have that same complexity in, for example, even with Hogwarts, it was you roll the 2d6, but you add something for your attribute. So those are still within the realm of normal or simple. I think specifically Vampire's problem, and I really love that system, and I love the game, but that rulebook is terrible to read. Like the order in which they present you the information. And don't get me wrong, it's an awesome book to read. It looks great, and they present you the whole history of the world through these letters and newspaper clippings and stuff, and it's awesome. But then the way they go about explaining you the rules, you literally have to go back and forth throughout the book the entire time to just... You will read on the first page like, oh, you get hunger, and then that will give you disadvantage, and then it give you what does it? What's it called? Oh yeah, it will give you a bane. And that's like, okay, what's a disadvantage? What's a bane? And you have to look those things up because it's explained at the end of the book. And then you read about a bane, and it's like, yeah, this bane will give you a -2 on your flaw. And it's like, what's a flaw? And then you have to go flip through the book to find the flaw. So that's just, I think, specifically the way in which the information is presented that makes it complex. But it's a fairly... I would consider it a fairly simple system.
It's a fairly simple system once you know it, but to get to know it, it's very painstakingly.
That's it. I did have to sit and watch a few games of it to figure it out.
So let's drop the bomb then. I dislike these kinds of systems with a lot of dice.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Let's do one of the main things then, like for resolution mechanics. Like, what systems do we like or don't like? So Jasper is coming out swinging with saying that he doesn't like these sorts of systems. And what do you mean by these sorts of systems? Do you mean dice pool systems or
dice pool systems? Yeah, I really dislike them. I have no feeling for these kind of systems where you have to roll a lot of dice and just count successes. I want to be able to add things and subtract things from my roll, and get my power from the power of the abilities themselves, and see what they actually do. Or, and this is the case with Call of Cthulhu, I like to know when I'm kind of right with a system that really plays to my strengths as I imagine them for my character, with a simple D100 rule, roll for every roll. But I only like those things in kind of narrative games, where I like the flat out die roll, where I immediately know the result of the die roll, in other games. But the multiple dice, I just don't have any feeling.
Let me immediately go to the opposite of that, and then I really want to know what Ash and Eric think, of course. But I love dice pool systems. I love them. I love them more than than, for example, and I love the D20 system as well. But I really love dice pool systems, and the main reason for this is that I don't think, like when you become more powerful in Dungeons & Dragons, it's a static number that gets higher. It's like, oh, you are a mechanic and you're a level 1 mechanic, and you get +3 on your wrenching ability, and then you're a level 15 mechanic, and it's like this +3 is now a +9, and I don't think that's sexy, or sexy is a stupid term, but I don't think that's a cool way to represent power. While in dice pool mechanics, and I also love dice, I'm a bit of a dice goblin, so maybe that's also part of it, but the way power is resembled is by throwing more and more dice, and nothing feels better than just throwing a grip full of dice onto the table, and it's like you roll 3 dice, you're not very good at it, you roll 12 dice, and you feel pretty damn powerful, because you're just, it's the sound and the feel and everything.
I understand, and I also understand the fact, when you told it, when you said it just a minute ago, or a couple of minutes ago, Michel, where you said you just have to count your successes, and that's the math you have to do to realize if your result is a success or something. I understand the vibe you can get out of that, but the thing is that and it is in every D20 system, for some reason people have the difficulty to add the result of a D20 like 13 and add +9 to it to get a 22. People have difficulty adding up, but for me, getting higher in the numbers is kind of a result on itself, where I feel accomplished by the fact that I'm good at something. Well, when I have to count the total number of dice that represent my skill, I don't have any feeling for their value, so to say. Value is a large part of why I like stuff.
I think math in general can be problematic in all systems. I think the counting the successes is that's where but that's also where specialized dice come in to make it even easier. But I really want to know, Eric wants to say something, I think, so I'm going to throw it to you, Eric.
No, I was just making alien clothes in it. But no. I come from my background is really a tabletop gamer, so the more dice the merrier is my approach to it. I've played Warhammer and Warhammer 40k for over 20 years, and there's nothing there's nothing better than a handful of dice and throwing them on the table, and then cry when you see that your roll is not high enough, or revel in the madness that you cause with your good dice rolls. I do like both systems. I don't have a preference to one system or the other. I like D&D for its complexity and the math that's behind it, and I also like the simpler systems just to switch my mind off of the constant calculating and just go with the flow. Though I do see D&D more of like a campaign game, and the other systems are, for me, preferably one-shots. So short adventures you have with a couple of successes and a couple of failures, because I can't see me playing, for example, a whole Dusk City Outlaw campaign for 70 sessions in a row, and just with the same types of dice rolls. That's when I prefer D&D, where my stats get better, my character gets stronger, I get more attacks, I get more spells, I get more, and I really don't see that progress in many of the.
But I think that progress is really a part of character creation and development, which is a part of the system, but not part of the resolution mechanic. So I think, because we can talk about that, fill an entire 4-part episode just on.
Yeah, but that's what I say. I like D&D more for the campaign setting and the mechanics that support D&D for that setting, and I love the other games more for what you do on parallel projections, the short adventures that you can do in 2 or 3 evenings, where we learn a couple of mechanics and just roll some dice and have fun with it. And that's what I really love about these dice pool systems. They really make it easy to learn and easy to play, but they are not challenging enough for me to keep playing them.
So for me, the percentile dice, for example, in Dust City Outlaws or Call of Cthulhu, and even the 2d6 Apocalypse system really fall underneath that banner of those are perfect for one-shots. They are super rules light. You know what you need to roll. You do it for one-shot. But for example, Vampire the Masquerade, don't you think you could play a campaign with Vampire the Masquerade? Because I think I could.
Well, it doesn't. I think it's a neat. I really love it, but I can't see me playing a whole campaign of Vampire the Masquerade. Yeah, a short campaign for 4 or 5 sessions. That's tops. And that fall back to D&D, because my heart is really into D&D, and I don't know why that is. There are a lot of.
Why is that, Eric? Why is that?
There are a lot
Asking
of systems
the real
out
questions.
there, but I think it's also. A piece of nostalgia dragging me back to D&D, because I started playing D&D when I was 15 or 16, and my heart is really in the game. And though I do love the other games, I have a lot of them. Like Michel, I hoard RPG systems. I just love to pour
This is
through
not
these
my
books, but
entire
every time.
collection, unfortunately.
No, I have more.
Unfortunately, I don't.
I have more down there, but every time I read through these rules, I always think okay, this is awesome, but it still would be a one-shot for me, because I always fall back to D&D.
That's super interesting, and we're going to dive deeper into that maybe later, maybe in another episode, because I still really want to hear Ash on this.
Yeah,
One of the reasons that I enjoy parallel projections so much, I'm a huge fan of novelty, which is I don't think can be overstated in TTRPGs. If you're having fun and you're enjoying it, and it's something a bit different and a bit quirky, I think it adds something to the game. Eric keeps coming back to D&D, which is great. We all love D&D. We've all played years and years and years of long, winding campaigns. But I think the most fun I've ever had in an evening was... Yeah, there we go. The most fun I've ever had in an evening, I played Malifaux, the RPG.
Oh, wow. You played it?
Yeah, I played Malifaux the RPG with a couple of friends who were just super into Malifaux. It was a war. I'm same as Eric. I'm a big war gamer as well, and never played Malifaux, never played the game system, but then tried the RPG out and had an absolute scream. Because for those of you that don't know, Malifaux doesn't use dice. It uses a deck of cards, just a standard 52 deck of cards, which you shuffle and then deal out. And those are your numbers.
Yeah.
So
there's also this Western game that uses similar systems.
Yeah, it uses a similar thing. So the drama there came from dealing out the cards face down.
Yeah.
and you don't even know what the score. Like, you don't even know what anyone's got until you choose then to overturn them. So I think I think there's a lot to be said for the novelty side of some of the systems. Genesis is a prime example, where I think that what people love about the Genesis system is the novelty. It's all the dice are different shapes and they got different things on them and different meanings, and it's just something a little bit different. But again, I question the ability to be able to play a full campaign of it. Vampire definitely could. But Dust City Outlaws, not a chance.
So
I'd run out of things to do.
So I said we weren't going to go too far into that, but for me, for example, with the Genesis system for the Star Wars games, the character leveling is well done as well in a almost computer game fashion, where you just get these. Your character has access to these different literal talent trees where you can spend points to buy all these talents, which is something that I also really like.
Playing Diablo 2 again, so
but it works. It's cool. It works for me at least. And but no, I think the problem for me with things like Genesis or Vampire the Masquerade, and I have the dice right there. I won't get up to get them, but they work really well if you have the actual dice. If you are just rolling regular d12s, then you have to actually have a table with you to, a 7 is this, a 12 is that.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the downsides of these systems, right? But
that feeds into the novelty, doesn't it? It's the novelty of having like the correct things to play with.
Yeah, which I'm a total sucker for that. So yeah, when we had that one shot for Vampire the Masquerade, I immediately went, I can't play this without the proper dice. So I bought the dice for that one shot. But I hope that we get to play it in the future again.
No, we will never play Vampire again. So.
But
I would like to play Vampire.
Yeah, me too. Okay.
Or one shot.
Yeah, we'll get back to it one day. I actually still have a short campaign even in my head, or maybe a one shot. So maybe I even DM it, and Ash can play a vampire if he wants to.
But will he see the return of Vernon?
And anyway, for dice pool systems, you so using these specialty dice sort of add to the novelty, which can add to the fun of the system. Not having these specialty die can make it a bit more complex or difficult, and not very easy to see, like, did I actually succeed or not. So one system that we haven't really discussed, unfortunately my rulebook is in another place right now, but I have the Alien RPG as well, which uses the Year Zero system, which is a dice pool of d6s, almost works the same as Vampire the Masquerade, where you have an ability and you have a skill, and your ability gives 2 and your skill gives 3, so you can roll 5d6, and then depending on a situation you might have some added stress, and you roll a different colored die to represent this stress, and a score on this makes things happen. But why I mention this? Wait 1 second. Why I mention this is because that system doesn't really need specialty dice, because and that sort of adds to the difficulty and the stress. Only a 6 is a success. Yep. So you can just roll regular d6s, and you just know only 6s are a success, which also makes it a bit more difficult to pass tests.
And 1s are failures. Right?
Not in all cases on the stress dice, I think, but maybe for different games using the Year Zero system
because I am now reading through Vazen, this beautiful book from our good friends at Free League Publishing. Yeah, you have the Dune book. Damn it.
I just realized.
And it also uses the D6 system, as you explained. Like you just add your skill and your appropriate what's it called, talent or whatever, and you just roll a bunch of D6s, and 6s are successes. And it's a really simple system that is really easy to learn. and yeah, it works quite well. But also with this system, it's just it's a novelty, and I think it will wear down quite fast if you play a couple of games and you just I think I will just return to D&D, but it will certainly be an awesome system to do a couple of one shots in.
I think Jasper wanted to say something for a while now, so.
Yeah, I did, but I can't remember now. Oh, okay. No, I know what I wanted to say. I think that all of these systems are kind of unique to their own kind of game that they represent, and that's the other thing I have with these games. Although, of course, a D20 system is very particular to, for example, Dungeons and Dragons. The 2D6 kind of game for Harry Potter is so specific for that game. Even though there are other iterations of that the same system in other games, that you can't expand on it really within the same genre. What I mean with that is that well, it never gets that tactical, so to say. So you have this game where you roll a 10 or higher and it's a success, and then that's it. You never get the sense that you are able to do something more, unless you get higher level spells, of course. That is a kind of progress, but you never feel that things are getting better. And even if you roll a lot of d6s and you're waiting for the 6s to arrive on your dice, it's the best system for a kind of stress game to be using exactly that system of dice. And I feel that there are systems like Dungeons and Dragons where the die can be used in so many ways with kind of the same rules, but in such a broad range that it's always interesting to develop a new kind of way to build your character to use that die. And that's what I'm missing in a lot of these games. For example, I don't think, well, Vampire is an exception there, because that has a lot of complex rules which revolve around rolling a lot of dice, but then also expanding your character in such a different way that you can do a whole lot of different things. But I think the D20 system kind of has the standard for that, because, well, let's just look at Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, where you have like 13 base classes with about 120 subclasses, which makes you have such a broad scope of things to do. But I'm losing track of what I'm trying to say.
You're making excellent points.
Yeah. So it's the complexity of the thing you do with the D20 that makes it interesting. When you're a berserker, it's kind of different when you roll a D20 than when you're rolling a D20 for a wizard.
If the entire system was not based on a D20 but on 3d6, for example, you have a smaller range, of course. You have 3 to 18, but 4d6. Yeah. It doesn't really matter, right? It could be a D100, could be a D20. You can get that same complexity in any die roll. Or don't you agree with that?
Yeah, that's true. No, I do agree. Although I like the 5% chance increment, because 3d6, the chance that you roll 18 is 1 in 216.
Yeah,
that makes it a lot smaller.
So that's another topic that's really important when discussing these things that we're not really going to get into. It's the probability, right, of rolling something. So on one single die, there's an equal probability to roll any of these, which is D20 is an excellent example of this. Rolling a 1 or 20 or 15, there's an equal chance to roll any of those numbers. And the modifiers don't really change that probability. They only change the range in which your result will be. So a +5 will make your range. Yeah. But the range is still 20. There's still 20 possible outcomes, and the chance of rolling any of these outcomes is still equally high. And as soon as you add multiple dice, you get a more bell-shaped curve. to your probability, which means that you are rolling closer to the average, which can be used to your advantage in designing your game if you want players to roll overall on or average, for example, and you don't want a lot of extreme successes or extreme low things. So
I don't wonder sometimes if it's the automation that some people have a problem with. Like a lot of people now don't really work anything out anymore. Like, you use D&D Beyond, you roll everything on there if you do, or you roll it and then just click the button on D&D Beyond and stuff happens. Whereas I think one of the reasons maybe we all come back to D&D as like older players, it's that pen and paper mentality, where you actually have to do the calculation and actually remember to add all your modifiers and remember to do all that. I don't wonder sometimes if that is what keeps bringing us back, not just the dice rolling system, but actually the mechanics of it involved, which is always very, very different to some of the smaller games.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I think that in any system, for me, having like a paper character sheet and working out the mechanics and thinking about it is important. That just how I started playing, because, and I've told this story before, I started playing with second edition, and I think it was around 10 years old. My neighbor had the second edition book, and we played it once or twice, and I really loved it. So I actually photocopied a lot of the tables and then sort of by hand wrote down the entire player's handbook from him, the rules, because I wanted to have. So somewhere in the house I have a notepad which has the rules to second edition, handwritten by me when I was 10. But so that's what I really like to do then. But I think that would go for any system then as
you
well.
Were 10?
Yeah.
So that's like 40 years ago, right?
Oh my God.
50, even 50.
Oh my God. Anyway, there was two big points for that Jasper brought up that I wanted to touch on. First was that I asked him, and I already asked him, which is, don't you agree that this could go for any system? Which is true to a certain sense. I talked about adding more dice changes the probability to a bell curve, to a bell curve instead of a equal probability. Of course, one way to go around that bell curve is what a lot of these systems do, like Vampire, which is not adding the numbers up to a specific target number, but using the successes or failures, because that changes your probabilities.
But Dungeons and Dragons has advantage,
which doesn't make it a bell curve, but it slightly pulls the. That's why a disadvantage and advantage in 5th edition is such a elegant solution, because it only slightly changes the probability and pulls it into either a positive or more negative direction.
I think they said it's about a +5 to a +7 modifier, actually. So it's a big.
It can be a big swing.
Yeah, but the fact is, you can never roll higher than a 20. So the end result never gets put out of range, so to say.
No.
And that's what I really like about the D20 system. That you can re-roll until you get a 20, but it will never get higher than a 20 with advantage.
No.
So only your bonus matters in that case, which is a big plus when you consider the 3.5 edition Dungeons and Dragons, where the modifier exceeds the D20 by so much that the D20 roll doesn't matter anymore.
No, yeah.
No. Or a die roll. Doing D6 plus 20 damage with your rapier means that its range is 21 to 26.
Doesn't matter anymore. Yeah. So the other thing that Jasper touched upon that I wanted to say is, and that's where you started your thing,
Rant.
your monologue, your rant, which is that
Slideshow.
systems are used to give a specific thematic feel, almost, right? So you mentioned the apocalypse system for Harry Potter, for example, that it's specific for that. And one of the interesting things that you mentioned, that it never becomes really tactical, and that's why I think I like those systems, like the apocalypse system, for one shots and more narrative control and just easy, quick decisions. Do I fail? Do I succeed? Or by how much? And you can put a cool story together in one evening. But when you get to really gritty tactical combat, for example, that's not something you could do it with the apocalypse system, and I believe you could do it with 2d6. But that's where we have to make the distinction between what's the resolution mechanic, which is rolling 2d6 or using a d20, and what's the actual system, which is the rules around this resolution mechanic and how you interpret the rules and stuff.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? When I put it like that?
I kind of agree.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Because I think you could make rolling 2d6 very gritty and tactical if you think about you can add
It's not about the
modifiers to it. You
2d6.
can it's not about the d20 or the 2d6. It's so then you get more in the territory of the system then.
Yeah.
Well,
I think I built a sheet in Google Sheets where, you all know the sheet where you can build the Dungeons and Dragons character. And I think I've got about 1,200 unique class features in there, and about the same in racial features. A lot of these are, you've got dark vision 60 feet, and then it applies to more than one race, but which makes the complexity from Dungeons and Dragons come in from the abilities themselves instead of the actual d20 roll. One of my favorite rules or features in early level Dungeons and Dragons is the Barbarians reckless attack. No, the reckless attack, where you gain advantage on your die, but everything against you gains advantage as well against your assay. It's such a simple rule, but it's a feature that makes it really distinct as a class with what you can do with it. And
it's funny because you had that same thing in 3rd edition. It was called power attack, and you could, for example, and I think you actually mentioned advantage being something like +5, because I think the power attack in D&D 3rd edition was +5 to your attacks, and all your enemies got +5 as well.
You could get up to +5. Your enemies didn't get a bonus against you, but you had to drop your armor class. Yeah,
you
that's
dropped
true.
your armor class by 5.
But with that rule, you increased the chance. Where with a reckless attack, you are still within the margins of that d20.
With the +5 as well, you roll.
Yeah, but if your modifier is +6, you can't get to 31 with the reckless attack, but you can get to 31 with power attack.
If the modifier becomes higher than a certain than higher than 10. If it's 11, then if it's
no. If your character has if it's a flat d20, and you don't have any modifiers,
yes, the range is 1 to 20.
If you're with reckless attack, you can get a 20 as a maximum. Where with power attack, you could get 25.
Yes, exactly. But the minimum that you rolled is a 5. So the range becomes from a 5 to a 25. So there's still only 20 options, right? That's what I meant. That's
true. But you don't have to hit that higher numbers, because that just implies that you have to increase the armor class for certain things. Just to compensate for the existence of power.
I totally
attack.
agree with that. That's the elegance of reckless attack, that it doesn't mess with those. And that's the great thing about 5th edition, where they could... Because power creep was a thing in 3rd edition, where things became so powerful that they had to increase hit points, increase armor classes. This creature now has an armor class of 40, and it has 4,000 hit points, you know?
Yeah, true.
We're doing maths with Jasper.
I build those characters. Yeah, we're doing math.
So let's not do math. But
no, math is great. Math is great. Let's do math.
Jasper will do we'll be doing a separate episode, just the two of us, just on probabilities and math.
You have to set up a slideshow with probabilities and maths.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, can I add something to the discussion?
Yeah,
And then-
of course.
Okay, yeah. Well, there is a reason why D&D is the most popular game of them all, or D&D-like games. So Pathfinder and D&D. Yeah, I don't know what the reason is, but
what you're going to say.
there must be a reason, because it is so popular for over 40 years now, and there are 5 editions now, numerous expansions, numerous options. Everybody plays the game worldwide now due to marketing campaigns. I do not see any of the games presented tonight, or any of the games that I know of, which has the same potential as of yet.
And this
like
is where
D&D.
this is where you show your age, Eric, because Call of Cthulhu, Vampire the Masquerade, even Cyberpunk.
They all have multiple
lasted
editions.
Not only
I
that,
know
they all
they
started around not around the same time as Dungeons and Dragons.
They all started years ago, but still Dungeons and Dragons is the most popular game of
at
all
the
time
moment.
in
But
RPGs.
popularity is not determined by what is the best system in my opinion. I mean, just look at music, for example.
It's not a discussion of the best. For me, it's not a discussion of the best system, but it presents the most options because it has the biggest fan base, and it can that way the company can produce more content, and then it can produce more content, and with more content, it will attract more fans because they can present more content, etc. etc. The game keeps growing and growing and growing, where other games have a couple of books out and they have a niche fan base.
I think there's no denying that Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition is bigger at this moment than it has ever been, and is certainly one of the biggest TTRPGs there is at the moment.
And also Pathfinder, right? So I'm not excluding Pathfinder, but Pathfinder and D&D both are built up on the same system.
Wait, a D20 system, yeah. I think Pathfinder builds more on the 3rd edition rules, right? But there's plenty of moments where Dungeons and Dragons throughout its history wasn't the top RPG, and one of the other systems was, for example. And I think it had a lot of media coverage, for example, which adds to the what's happening. Anyway, which adds to the popularity. But I think you're sort of underestimating the power of some of the other systems and the successes, because maybe, and I don't know the numbers, but I can imagine that if you look at the percentages of people playing TTRPGs, that maybe 50% of that is Dungeons and Dragons, and the other 50% is all other systems, for example. That's still like still 1 out of 2 people that doesn't care about Dungeons and Dragons, but is playing some sort of other system, right?
I think again it comes down to a mixture of things: longevity, marketing. You know, I think the one thing that did for Dungeons and Dragons more than anything was the series, The Big Bang Theory. I think that did more for Dungeons and Dragons marketing than anything they could have ever come up with.
The Satanic Panic, man.
Yeah, but I think there is a lot to be said for the dice mechanic. I think it's complex enough to have what Jasper keeps wanting, which is always the numerous options, the ability to sort of change subtly the dice rolls enough to make it feel different each time you roll the dice. But in and at the same time, it's not so complicated that you spend forever trying to figure out whether or not you've hit anything. once you've got that ability to just look at the dice and know what your plus modifiers are, what you almost don't see the numbers anymore, do you? You just roll the dice, 14 on the dice. I know that's a 22, without thinking about it. So I think that's probably why we keep coming back to it. It's that mix of sort of familiarity,
but
and ease.
It's also still cutting it short, I think, because when you look at Dungeons and Dragons in the basic box that you got, like the first edition of Dungeons and Dragons, it was complex. Then you got second edition, which became more complex, which had some really silly rules in it. Then you got third edition, which toned it all down and made it simple, but it became extreme. Then you had fourth edition that was kind of a disaster, but had some great content at the same time. They had fifth edition that took about from fourth, third, and second edition, took all of the best parts in a way and made a fifth edition thing out of it. And now, if I would go and make a sixth edition rule set, I would take fifth edition and combine it with third edition again to get what was right in third edition to add it to the fifth edition thing. So it does evolve in a way that makes it easier to play and more cool at the same time. You didn't have that many options in second edition Dungeons and Dragons. It was really silly. You could get a castle at as a ninth level fighter, but that's what
I got the rule book right there. It's like there's no power attacks, there's no cleave attacks, there's
the fighter in fifth edition is cool.
Yeah, it's super cool.
You know, so it also evolved in a way that went with the times and really understood the player base. They really did some good marketing and some good beta testing for this edition of Dungeons and Dragons. They made some mistakes, like doing your full attack when you move. I think that should be cut. I
think they did that for simplicity, because the time we spent discussing at our table during the Legacy of Time whether people could still attack or not, in time alone could have been used to play an entire new Dungeons & Dragons campaign.
They kind of resolved that in third edition, but not in the best way. But they didn't resolve it in fifth edition in the best way, and that's what I say. Combine those two editions and you get the perfect edition.
I totally disagree, because I hate third edition with a passion.
I know.
Can't wrap my head around the rules, man.
But you have to add to.
It's so weird, because for me, reading. So I started with second edition. I absolutely love that. But Taco is, or to hit armor class 0 is known for being confusing, let's say, because it's not really complicated. It was just confusing for a lot of people. But when third edition came, it sort of took a lot of things from second edition and made it easier. Like higher rolls were always better, that sort of stuff. And then they just started adding options and options and options. So I have the player's handbook for third edition here, and I got a Wheel of Time book, rules for based on the third edition. But there's a lot more third edition books there. And the options were just vast, right?
I remember a player saying to me, "Man, I got this book, and there you have this skill trick where when you have acrobatics and some other skill at level 15, you can do this thing."
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, this is getting way out of hand, because now you have to have these specific books to do this specific thing. Yeah. Otherwise, before you had that knowledge, you could do it anyway because you just made a roll up for it. But now that you've introduced this rule, you can never do it without using that rule again. So that was really the problem.
There was a book. There was a book in third edition where it had a unicorn in it, and that unicorn, as a special ability, would cast a heal on every turn in an area of effect around it. And then, as a druid, you could take some feats and things, and there was this whole thing that you could do, this certain build, and then you could wild shape into a unicorn while summoning another unicorn, and there would be 2 unicorns casting heals in an area of effect every round during the entire combat, for example. Like, that's the moment where I thought, okay, this is awesome. but it's also getting a
Yeah,
bit ridiculous.
you had this to elaborate on that. You had this cool spell that was called Locate City, but then you could add damage to an area of effect spell. So you could deal like 1d6 fire damage or something, but that spell would also knock the target back to the edge of the area of effect. And the area of effect of Locate City was 20 miles, so you would be thrown 20 miles to the outside of the circle and crash land there. So,
I mean,
but there's a simple rule to that. The dungeon master will just say, "Don't do that," because that's stupid.
Yeah. But I do love the creative freedom that you have with all these feats and skills and classes and prestige classes. You could literally build anything. And that made it super unwieldy. It made it difficult. It forced DMs to know all the rules of all the books, and there were too many to own. So those are things that really complicated third edition. But Eric, because this is what I actually wanted to say, I don't understand why you hate third edition so much. Because I grew up with second edition, then played third edition, never played fourth edition. But when playing 5th edition, I felt like coming back to all the things that I loved from 3rd edition. It was basically the same system for me, except that all the modifiers, instead of being plus 20 and plus 25, were now plus 2 and maximum plus 5. You know, it was sort of a bounded in version.
Bounded accuracy. That's the real term for it.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Well, what I love about 5th edition is that it's very easy. You have also the rules like advantage or disadvantage, which are very simple and very plain. It doesn't take a genius to figure out these rules. And 3rd edition is just so rules heavy. It's the same with Pathfinder for me. I tried reading through the Pathfinder book, and it's just... It's too much rules. I don't like to do a study about it.
Okay, I get it.
And I played 4th edition, and I know many people dislike 4th edition, and I know why many people dislike 4th edition, but 4th edition for me was much more simple to play. The mechanics were very simple to comprehend, and within no time I could play 4th edition, and that's why I do have a soft spot for 4th edition. It was very easy to learn, very easy to manage as a DM, and very easy to play for new players. And that's what I love about 5th edition. 5th edition is a game, I explained this game to many starter players, and within 1 or 2 sessions, they really get the hang of 5th edition. While with 3rd edition, I played in Jasper's campaign for 6 years with 3rd edition, or 3.5.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, still after 5 or 6 years, I still had a small grasp on the rules.
Yeah, but okay. So this is my question then, because for me the rules are not that complex, because you roll a d20 and you either fail or you have a success, right? So where the complexity comes in, and I will give you that, in, for example, 3rd edition, I think the most well-known example is grappling or grappling somebody.
Yeah, I said it already in chat. Grappling is just horrible.
There's 5 pages where you first have to do this, and then this. If you succeed, then this, maybe this, or that, and then on and on. So I'll give you that. But I don't think that's really complexity of the rules. That's just complexity of a specific... element.
The other thing is gaps. 3rd edition had a lot of gaps. When you were not building your character optimal, you just couldn't compete. And that was the biggest thing in 3rd edition.
Yeah.
So
I think. Sorry, I think I do slightly disagree. Like 3, I cut my teeth in 3 and 3.5, and then 4th. You know, I think it was much easier to teach people to play 4th edition, but it was a hell of a lot harder to DM. I found it a lot harder. Like the concentration level involved when you were dealing with things like we were mentioning in chat, like the terrain rules, for example. I mean, again, as a DM, I was probably making a rod for my own back at the time, but the problem with that was because those rules existed, you felt like you had to use them. And the players didn't really care about it. because they would just go, oh, okay, we're on that kind of terrain, fine, we just add these modifiers and do this and whatever. But you would then have to be running that in the background in your head as well as doing the regular combat, and it's sort of maybe it was because I was a younger DM at the time, but I found it much more challenging than I ever found 3.5 or 5 to DM.
Same. Yeah. So for all its negative things in 3.5, I think I got the hang of the balance aspect in 3.5 nailed down, so I could make every encounter interesting in a way. And then in 4th edition, actually it doesn't matter if you're level 1 or 30, you do the same thing, which was a big problem in 4th edition. Because a barbarian had an area of effect and a mage had an area of effect, and it dealt the same amount of damage, and it was just an increase from first level in a couple of dice. But then in 5th it all became easier.
I've come back from hating on 4th, so I was one of those guys that hated a lot on 4th. And I've seen enough of Matt Colville's videos to know that there's actually some very cool stuff in 4th edition that I would be really interested in to try out someday. And actually the
skill
system,
challenges.
But I think that Jasper really hit on something which was my main reason for putting those books away almost immediately when they came out. So coming from 3rd, where the options were endless and everything felt unique. Whether you were a necromantic barbarian sorcerer or if you could think it, you could dream it, you could build it, right? And then you go to 4th edition, where it doesn't actually matter what class I play, because everything feels the same. And they just changed the names, so power attack or magic missile, but they all did the same amount of damage or the same area or the same thing. And I felt reading that first time, reading that player's handbook, I was so bored by it, where I thought like, I don't want to play any of these characters. And I closed that book and I never touched them again.
It was very similar to my experience of going back and reading the 2nd edition books. I was like, so I can either play a cleric with Polearm Mastery, or I can play a barbarian with Polearm Mastery, or I can play.
I think for second edition, the problem is that if you read, for example, the cleric or the wizard, it's basically you get more spells when you level up. So you go to the spell section and you see all these awesome spells, and that's great. For the fighter, nothing much happens. Like over 20 leveling from 1 to 20. Not much happens. You get a castle, you get henchmen, you get a key, land.
And actually, the getting more attacks, the more attacks thing was an optional rule.
Yeah. But then again, thinking about that was, for example, if you take something like Birthright, or it becomes a more RP kind of leveling, where you become, as a fighter, you become the lord of your own area. But we never played really those campaigns a lot. So as soon as 3rd edition came out, we started adding stuff from 3rd edition to our 2nd edition games.
So the thing which makes 2nd edition the best edition ever is Planescape, because Planescape is just the best. There's nothing better in Dungeons and Dragons than Planescape.
Still looking for that book for you, man.
Rumored for next year.
Hopefully, and if they do if the Van Richten's guide does it, then I'm confident they can pull it off.
Yeah.
Because that's the best book right now, and I think that if they take on that job, then they can then they can do a new Planescape campaign that makes it more. That makes it okay.
So we've been talking a lot about Dungeons and Dragons in the end. Well, I think one of the ideas was shining a light on some other systems as well.
Yeah.
So we, as Eric said, in the end we came back to Dungeons and Dragons. I think because that was one of the topics that I wanted to discuss, and I hinted at it, and that's like the specific systems can have specific feels, thematic feels, and work for special themes. So the kind of story that I want to tell, I don't think would work well with the Dungeons and Dragons system. I'm intimately familiar with it over 3 different editions and even some OSR stuff and with the D20 system and what you can do with it. But I think that for the kind of stories that I want to tell, that I have in my head, I needed another system, right? So I'm looking at that.
I think that's the beauty of a thing like parallel projections, isn't it? Because I think one of the things that we do is we want to play a heist game because it's fun. Now, trying to play a heist game in D&D, I've seen outsourced material. I've seen like even Dragon Heist, which is technically the one that they push forward for it. It just doesn't work.
Nope.
You spend, it ends up just becoming another combat sequence, or it becomes
you can make the rules.
A sneaking sequence.
You can make the rules for it in D&D, but it becomes clunky and too huge, sort of. Because then, everything refers back to, you can have the planning sessions like in Dust City Outlaws, but then when you actually have to do something, instead of hitting these percentages and being good at something, it's just like, okay, roll a sneak, roll a convince somebody, like a persuasion check, and it changes the dynamic and it changes the outcome. It changes because there's a different chance of succeeding with the D20 system or using that D100 system, because it's easier. Funnily enough,
that's why when I have to do a heist in D, or my players want to do a heist in D&D, the first thing I do is reach for Dust City Outlaws. I go, right, we're going to do it, but what we're going to do is we're going to play like a mini game within the game.
First time I played Dust City Outlaws was in our Sunday Theros game, where we wanted to free some goblin slaves, and we had to go to a market at night and free the slaves. And he said, okay, we're going to do it like this. I'm going to give you planning stages and you're going to roll D100s. And that was my introduction to Dust City Outlaws, and I loved it. But
actually, when you do a heist game in 3.5, it works.
Yes, it would.
Because there you can excel at the thing, and that's the thing with 5th edition. You can't excel, or at least you can't excel that much.
Unless you use your Excel.
But still, it changes the dynamic. You can excel at a certain thing, but it's still you would still be bound to the probability of rolling your D20 with a extreme modifier, for example, and instead of the like a percentile dice. And also the limitation of your skills in Dust City Outlaws is what makes it so cool for the heists, because you have to really use things creatively and think about what you're doing and how you're doing it.
Well, I think the whole mechanic for 4th edition, so the skill challenge mechanic, where you set up a couple of challenges that the players need to solve, and they use their own skills at their own interpretation to beat these challenges, also works quite great for things like the heist game, and you can implement it in any edition of D&D.
Yeah,
but I use the skill challenge a lot in 5th edition because I do love the mechanic, though I do think that the heist mechanic in Dust City Outlaws works better in any case, but I have to teach my players a whole nother system. And
so and similar, for example, an alien kind of adventure on the Nostromo would not work really well with the Dungeon Dragon system, but works really well with this stress mechanic in the Year Zero system. Right.
But I could definitely see myself in the future if I went. I haven't planned out a game using Van Richten's yet, but I'm gonna do it at some point. There is a part of me that thinks I would love to steal the hunger mechanic for D&D and tie it into the what's it called? Fatigue mechanic. Is it fatigue? I remember what it's called.
Yeah.
Fatigue mechanic.
And make a similar sort of thing for the fatigue mechanic for like vampire hunger or lycanthropy or something like that. Yeah. And I think again, having a quick. I said in the chat, having a very quick session 0 and saying, right, these are the mechanics I'm going to use, because I think it lends itself nicely to the way that this is going to work. But it's just having that trust and buy-in from players, and not abusing it. That would be the thing. But I'd love to throw hunger into D&D, because I think that would just absolutely start messing with some of the lycanthropy stuff.
And if is there so I think we need to wrap it up. But I think that's one of the main things that you can do, right? So I saw Fel comment in chat, like combining 2 systems. One of the great things that you can always do is take things from systems that you like and put them in your main system.
Absolutely.
So using 4th skill challenge in your 5e games, using hunger mechanic from Vampire in your D&D system. Right, so that's what they call hacking. You hack a system and you add stuff to it or take stuff away that you don't like, and that's always something that you can do. And
yeah, so it's interesting that you're saying that, because I can imagine introducing other systems into other systems, like the hunger mechanic. Funny thing is, I have a Craven, which is a kind of my own build for 5th edition, which is like a half vampire thing who gets hungry at a certain point, and I just let him roleplay it, and he felt the urgency himself to start drinking at a certain point, and did it at the worst possible opportunity, and it made for a lot of drama. Sometimes it's just that.
Yeah, but you really need. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you need a player that is really keen on that, and sometimes you have to force the players a bit. And then I think for Vampire the Masquerade, the hunger mechanic is not only signifying how hungry you are in RP terms, like you need to act hungry because you are. It also actively starts influencing your successes, and it will make. It can cause things that you have no control over as a player.
Yeah, though, and what the I think the thing that is most wrong about that system is I do want to fill my hunger checks, and I do want to see where it goes. So
it will happen. So if you play a campaign, Eric, for Vampire the Masquerade, that will happen enough.
And it's one of those what's great about adding a small dice pool into something like D&D is that you start failing more and more and more until you sort of rectify that mistake. It's another thing I'm doing at the moment on Theros, where every time they go into a temple they're not aligned to, they have to make a will check, and if they fail that will check, I've got tables and tables of all the different gods, and something might happen to them. And it's just adding in, it's just adding in those stupid little layers. Yeah. There's nothing in D&D that says that should happen, and I think it came from was it Infinity?
Well,
no, I think it was the new one. I think it was the new Cyberpunk one. I can never remember the name of. That I got asked to read.
Red? Cyberpunk Red?
No. There was a TV show that on Netflix.
Altered Carbon.
Altered Carbon. Yeah.
I didn't watch the TV show and read the book and got completely confused. Had to watch the TV show.
That's confusing as well. Yeah. I disliked it though.
Yeah. So from that, there's a couple of mechanics where obviously as your cortex gets taken out multiple times, you start to degrade your ability to remember things, and your ability to interact with the world, and that is based upon a little bit of random chance. And I really liked the tables they had for that, but that's a game based on tables and tables and tables of stuff. So it's things like that which is quite good just to throw in every now and again. Especially when you're trying to flavor a world. I know we're not going into world building and stuff, but just from sort of my point of view, I'm quite a magpie, and I read a lot of these D&D systems and role-playing systems and different games and different ways of doing things. I quite like to cherry pick, and I'll just throw them into the different games, just as and when appropriate, to kind of just suit the need at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. And that's a great way to do it. So before we wrap up, I have one final question, and you have to make this answer short. And it's not a question that has a short answer, or maybe it does, but you have to keep it short. But the question for all of you, then, is there a be-all, end-all system, the one system to rule them all, or not?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
It's a very short answer.
Yeah,
that's the shortest
you
answer, I
can you
think.
can elaborate on that then if you.
Yeah, still one of the be all. I still think it's D&D 5e, and that's. Yeah,
Okay.
You can go anywhere with D&D 5e. You can, like Ash
But we just
said,
discussed that you can't really like the stress mechanics and that sort of stuff, or the feeling of power you get from throwing multiple dice.
Yeah, but it's very adaptable, and that's the great thing about D&D is, like Ash just said, you can just get a couple of tables from a different game and add them to your own game, and it still fits into D&D, and that's D&D really encourages you to think creatively with the rules, and other game systems, I don't think they are that flexible as D&D. For the games that I played are not as flexible as D&D in that regard. So if I have to pick any game, then still I would fall back on D&D, and then 5e.
Jasper, you said.
Well, Void Walkers, of course.
Okay. Do you want to talk
What
about
is this
it?
Void Walkers game? It's my own game. So, yeah. So, Voidcast came from a from the idea of Michel and me and kind of Roger and Eric, and everyone wanted to play together on stream and just have a lot of fun. But Eric, Roger, and me also have this Void Walkers project where we're building a role-playing game, which I've been developing it for like 15 years, and I decided I couldn't do it on my own, so I got Roger and Eric involved. And it's for me, it's the game that takes a lot from other games, but is adaptable to multiple universes, multiverses, and makes combat between two persons as hard as combat in a massive battle if you're level 1 or level 20, and it keeps it exciting in all times even if you're playing medieval or a science fiction campaign. So we're building that, and I think it's making great progress, but that's happening behind the scenes of podcast.
Yeah. All right.
So just
but no dice pools though. So
just a D20. A D20 for damage and a D20 for attack. So
I have to say I don't know. Like, I think it's because I'm such a magpie, and I love trying new things and trying different systems, and just I mean, my Kickstarter account is probably, if they did a platinum, gold, ultra membership for that, I think I'd because
you'll be diamond.
Oh yeah, I'd double black diamond or something. I don't know, but I don't know. I don't think there's ever one solution. I do love the D&D D20 mathematical way of doing things, but I think it gets quite stale and repetitive in a long campaign. And I think if that's what people are struggling with, like if that's they've been playing a long campaign, I'm just bored with this now, do something else. Like maybe have a couple of games where you go, do you know what, we're going to do this task and we're going to do it by percentile, because there's a couple more things we can do. We can make it a bit more random. There's another system which I'll plug because I kickstarted it and spent way too much money on it, which is Fate Forge, which does it kind of adds dice pool to a D&D setting in certain areas where you can have magic surges and sort of it just kind of augments the game a little bit more, and I think that's what I think some people are missing. And it's not just using D&D specific things to augment your games. Like, go and find a campaign. There's a few things from Paranoia that I'm probably going to put into Theros. Now, there's 2 game systems that couldn't be more different. Like, Paranoia is communism set in a futuristic nightmare where everyone lives inside a computer. But some of the mechanics and the way that it works will be hysterical for a side quest, and will really make the players. I mean, it's kind of like Among Us, but for RPGs. So it's just going to make the players super suspicious of each other and super paranoid, which is, funnily enough, the game Paranoia. And I think that's maybe what might be missing from your game if you're kind of struggling with the dice and the mechanics. Is maybe just do something else for a couple of sessions, and then come back to it and realize, as we always do with D&D, actually this is a really good system.
Yeah. So my answer would be no. There is no end-all, be-all, end-all system, because because in the end there's always, like, I love to approach it from like different stories and different settings, and what all these systems do really well is they add something unique to a system that feels unique and very relevant for that one setting or theme, which doesn't work well for other settings, and you can borrow stuff. You can always sort of approach it in a D&D system, for example, or a die pool system, but it usually falls flat for one reason or another, and that's just because it's not meant specifically for that theme. So that's probably the correct answer. But if there is a perfect system, for me, it would definitely involve dice pools. Because I just love rolling shiny dice rocks. No, and then I will do that for a couple of years and then come back to a D20 system like D&D, because I've been playing that for years and it's super, super effective. But some systems that we haven't mentioned that I think are important to mention because they are used a lot right now. So Fate, of course, is a big one. I'm glad you mentioned it. Another one, I showed it briefly, the rulebook of Modiphius's Dune game uses the 2D20 system. We haven't really talked about it. For me, that has a specific reason, because of all the systems that we've talked about, so 2D6 or D20 or Dice Pool or the Genesis, Year Zero, I can explain you the rules of that resolution in 2 sentences. Like, you roll the die and you add the numbers and it succeeds or fails, or you count the successes and succeeds or fails. And for the life of me, I can't do that for the 2D20 system. So that might be a problem. Maybe I just don't get it, or it doesn't resonate. Maybe I should read the rules better. So 2D20, Fate, other important ones that we're forgetting. I had one. You have
D100?
Netrunner. Yeah, D100 is Call of Cthulhu, Dark City Outlaws. We talked about that a lot. You got games
and the old Dark Heresy game.
Yeah,
it's so much fun with this.
Old school. So you mentioned Altered Carbon. You have Cyberpunk and Netrunner. Netrunner also works with a dice pool system, I think. But instead of counting successes, you add the dice together to create a number, which is a failure success, if I recall correctly. Any other system?
They also have games, computer games have Pillars of Eternity and such games where those kind of RPG rules apply, but they're really messy. I think they're really messy. So a lot of RPGs on computers as well that have kind of comprehensive systems, but
yeah, that's true.
And then you've just got off the wall ones like Malifaux, which is just for the sake of it lets you cards. So,
I got like this one. I love this one, for example. Mouse Guards, like a unique system, uses D6s for the system, but it's so there's
actually there was a Dragonlance setting which used cards.
There you go.
Yeah, Fifth Age.
Yeah,
Fifth Age Dragonlance.
So we mentioned the card system as well, and there's people like you can flip coins. There's a lot of ways to do it. We mostly talked about dice this evening. because I think that's the most fun. Although the card mechanic, especially if you're playing a Western style game and you just shuffle a deck of cards and you pull out the ace of spades or whatever and something crazy happens. That just seems awesome for me. But then again, maybe not for a lengthy year campaign that will last years, but more for a couple of one-shots or a short campaign. Okay, does anyone have anything to add to these points? I think we had an excellent discussion.
I think so too.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Really glad we did
Enjoyed
this.
it.
Yeah, thank you so much for hanging out with me and trying this crazy thing of just doing a roundtable discussion. And maybe we'll bring it back and do some more roundtable discussions in the future, like talk about character creation of different systems or character progression in different systems, because there's a lot of approaches you can talk about. You can talk about a lot of different approaches that these games are taking with character progression. Thanks everyone in chat for watching us. You were amazing. There was some great input from chat throughout the episode as well. If you have any questions, go join our Discord. Go find us on YouTube. Go find us on our social media. Go follow Fireside Portal at twitch.tv/the Fireside Portal. It's Ash's new project, which is absolutely amazing, where they let DMs fight to the death or something like that, and to see who becomes the Lord. Yeah, with metal to see who becomes the Lord of Scotland. So
that's correct. Everything you
big shout out to all our friends from Top Down Tabletop. I saw a few people. Careful Cantrip, of course. Rick Vechel for Vechel Fantasy. All of them. We love you all, and we hope to see you again soon. Tomorrow, Jasper?
Is it Monday yet?
Are you doing anything, Jasper, tomorrow?
Probably I'll be doing Jasper's Laboratory, but I have to see if my work allows it, because I'm really busy right now.
Okay, we can also sit together and do a roundtable discussion on character progression.
Okay, that would be cool as well. We'll see.
Anyway, one last thing. Yes, next Monday we'll be right here playing one of these famed one-shots you've heard about during these episodes. And next week we're playing the new Avatar RPG, which was kickstarted successfully only a month ago. I'm a backer for one, but they gave you the starter kit for free, and we're going to use that to play a one-shot as Benders in the Avatar The Last Airbender universe, and I can't wait for that one. We'll be joined by our amazing friends from Top Down Tabletop, which now include Felleranks. Yes, and we'll also be joined by Crimson, who is doing the Fireside Portal together with Ash. So we're super excited for them to join. And am I forgetting anyone? Shanks is joining us. I'm joining.
Shanks is always joining us.
I could be joining, but I'm still uncertain.
Maybe Jasper is joining. We'll see. Hope to see you all again tomorrow and next Monday. Bye-bye.
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 Oh, shit. I have to... yes. Bye-bye.